The Laughing Skies, August 17, 1943, 27,000 feet above Regensburg, Germany. The sky is an ocean of vapor trails and fire. Dozens of silver bombers carve their way through thin clouds, their engines roaring in synchronized fury. Beneath them, black flak bursts bloom like dark flowers, violent, rhythmic, and deadly. Inside one of those aircraft, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, the air trembles. The temperature hovers near 40 below zero. Frost glitters on oxygen masks as the crew struggles to keep formation. Every man aboard knows the mission's name: Operation Double Strike. The target, Regensburg, one of the industrial hearts of the Reich, but thousands of feet below, German anti-aircraft crews are laughing. The Luftwaffe officers on the ground, men like Oberst Hermann and his peers, had mocked the American bombers for months. Too slow, they said. Too big? They'll never make it home. To them, the Flying Fortress was an arrogant symbol of American overconfidence, a heavy, lumbering machine built by dreamers who'd never faced the discipline of the Luftwaffe, and as the first wave crosses into German airspace, their mockery seems justified. The sky lights up with flak bursts, tearing through formations. Fighters, Bf-109s and Fw-190s, scream upward to meet them, black crosses flashing on silver wings. The radio chatter of the bombers turns chaotic. Tail gunner. Bandits 6 o'clock high. Number 3 engines hit. Fire in the nacelle. Hold formation, hold formation. You can almost feel the wind tearing at the fuselage, the thunder of machine guns shaking the airframe. The sky above Regensburg becomes a slaughterhouse. Down below, Luftwaffe spotters grin. This is what they expected, these flying fortresses falling from the heavens, their massive frames breaking apart in plumes of smoke. It feels like validation, but then something strange happens. One crippled B-17, riddled with holes, doesn't spiral down. Its right wing is shredded, its tail half gone, yet the pilot keeps it level. Another follows, engine sputtering, fuselage torn open, but somehow still flying west. TWFFers raise their binoculars, stunned. How are they staying in the air? Because the Flying Fortress was no ordinary bomber. It was built for punishment, a fortress in the sky, held together by American steel, crew courage, and engineering genius, and this was only the beginning. Hours earlier, before the smoke and the screaming engines, the crews of the 8th Air Force had gathered on a damp English airfield. The men were quiet, their flight jackets zipped up against the morning chill. A briefing officer pointed to a large map, red lines stretching across Europe. "Gentlemen," he said, "today we're striking at the heart of the Reich, Regensburg. This is not a milk run." They all knew what that meant. Regensburg wasn't just another German city. It was home to the Messerschmitt factory, where the feared Bf-109 fighters were born, the very machines that hunted them daily. Destroying it could cripple the Luftwaffe's ability to defend the skies. The briefing ended. No grand speeches, no promises of survival. Just a quiet understanding among the men. Some of them would not return. Hours later, when the bombers crossed into enemy territory, the Luftwaffe pounced. The first formations were torn apart, cannon shells exploded through cockpits, wings snapped, and yet, time and time again, the same image replayed itself. B-17s refusing to fall. The Germans couldn't understand it. Each flying fortress had been hit dozens, sometimes hundreds, of times. Holes as wide as dinner plates gaped through the fuselage. Yet the aircraft still clawed westward, its propellers stubbornly turning. Inside one of them, Captain Robert Rosenthal gripped the control column with bloodied hands. His bomber, Royal Flush, had taken hits in both wings. Oxygen was low, the radio dead. One waist gunner was gone, ripped away by cannon fire. But Rosenthal wouldn't leave formation. He knew why. The B-17 wasn't just a machine, it was a lifeline. Its redundant control systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, an armored cockpit meant even catastrophic damage couldn't always bring it down. It was designed to endure, to get its crew home. The German pilots soon stopped laughing. They attacked again and again, only to watch these beasts absorb punishment no other bomber could. A Luftwaffe ace named Major Egan Meyer later admitted, "They flew through walls of fire. We could not kill them fast enough." By the time the first bombs fell over Regensburg, entire squadrons of flying fortresses were still intact enough to drop their payloads, tons of explosives raining down on Messerschmitt's factories. The smoke rose higher than the clouds themselves. Back in the air, the cost was staggering. Dozens of B-17s were lost, hundreds of airmen killed or captured. But what stunned the Germans wasn't how many went down, it was how many made it back. Hours later, in England, mechanics counted the returning aircraft. Some landed with half their wings missing. Others touched down with dead engines and tail sections barely attached by wires. One B-17, the old pub, returned with 179 holes. Its tail gunner dead, its radio operator bleeding out, but alive, that night. In Luftwaffe intelligence briefings, the tone had changed. The laughter was gone. Now, there was unease. What kind of nation could build a bomber that simply refused to die? And deeper still, if these machines could reach Regensburg in daylight, what would come next? The sun rose over Bavaria like a pale coin, glinting against frost-covered fields. High above, the sky shimmered with silver once more. Another armada of B-17 flying fortresses, bound for the beating heart of German industry. This time, their target was the ball-bearing factories of Schweinfurt, the tiny mechanical hearts that kept every German tank, aircraft, and truck moving. The mission would later be remembered by a single name, Black Thursday. As the bombers crossed the Rhine, the Germans were ready. Fighter groups lay in wait, Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, even the new twin-engine Zersterers. The Luftwaffe had learned from Regensburg. Now they came with vengeance, and still, the Americans came in daylight. It was insanity. The Germans thought madness to fly in broad daylight into the jaws of their defenses. But to General Ira Eaker and his crews it was about precision. Night bombing blurred the truth. The flying fortress was built for daylight, to aim, to hit, to destroy. The first German fighters struck at 11:45 a.m. They came in waves. 20. Then 40, then entire squadrons. Cannon shells raked through the tight formations. Entire bombers vanished in midair, exploding into orange fireballs. Crews watched helplessly as their friends went down in flames. Parachutes blooming far below like fragile white flowers. Inside, "Ain't it gruesome?" Lieutenant Paul W. Tibbets shouted over the roar of the engines. "Keep it together. Don't break formation." The men obeyed. Fear was everywhere, but discipline held them together like steel bolts in the airframe. From the ground, German villagers looked up, shielding their eyes from the sunlight. The contrails twisted together like scars across the heavens. And then came the thunder, bombs falling in perfect, terrible rhythm, striking Schweinfurt's factories with surgical precision. At that moment, laughter vanished from every German briefing room. In the span of minutes, the city's industrial heart was shattered, fires spreading across assembly halls and foundries, the supply of ball bearings collapsing in a rain of molten metal. The Luftwaffe's own lifeline had been cut by the very machines they once mocked, but the price was horrific. Of the 291 bombers that set out for Schweinfurt, 60 never returned. Some crews vanished over the Black Forest. Others limped back to England with engines sputtering, landing on shredded runways with corpses frozen at their guns. And yet, despite the blood, despite the loss, the mission proved something no one could deny anymore. The flying fortress wasn't a symbol of arrogance. It was a statement that America could build a machine so durable, so relentless that even against the full fury of the Luftwaffe, it would not break. That day, German commanders stopped laughing. Instead, they began to fear, because if this was what daylight bombing looked like in 1943, what would the sky bring in 1944 when thousands more fortresses came, and when they were no longer alone? The answer would arrive soon, and it would change the war forever. The sky, once ruled by the black crosses of the Luftwaffe, now trembled with a new kind of thunder. It wasn't just the low growl of piston engines, it was the steady unstoppable rhythm of an industrial giant fully awake, hundreds upon hundreds of flying fortresses stretched from horizon to horizon, their polished aluminum skins gleaming like a wall of sunlight. And they were no longer flying alone. Below and above them danced sleek silver escorts, P-51 Mustangs, their long noses cutting the air like blades. These fighters could now follow the bombers all the way to Berlin and back, sweeping the skies clean of German resistance. For the men of the Luftwaffe, it was the beginning of the end. Their fuel reserves were low, their pilots exhausted, their aircraft aging. Even the legendary aces, Galland, Barkhorn, Raoul, watched helplessly as the tide shifted. The vast industrial cities that once powered the Reich now burned night after night: Regensburg, Schweinfurt, Hamburg, Berlin, Dod, and always. Above the fires, the same shape appeared: the four engines, the broad wings, the unmistakable outline of the flying fortress. Inside one of those bombers, Lieutenant Jack Mathis hunched over his Norden bomb sight. He had been hit by flak, his arm nearly severed, but refused to abandon his post. With his last strength, he adjusted the crosshairs and released the bombs perfectly on target, moments before collapsing. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. Posthumously, stories like his spread across airfields and radio briefings, transforming the B-17 into legend. Crews called it Old Faithful, Misbehaving, Memphis Belle. To them, each bomber wasn't just metal, it was a living thing, a protector that carried them home through fire and fury. Even German intelligence reports took on a tone of awe. One Luftwaffe colonel wrote bitterly in his report, "They come in daylight as if the sun itself shields them. You can shoot at them and they keep coming. You can burn their cities and they will return." That was the power of the flying fortress, not just its armor, but its message. It told the world that no distance was too great, no defense too strong. It told the Reich that America could reach its very heart, and that the sky, once a place of German pride, now belonged to someone else. By the time the Allies landed in Normandy, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of itself. The factories that once built Messerschmitts now lay in ashes, and the sound that haunted German cities day and night, that steady drone high above the clouds, was no longer something to mock. It was something to fear. The winter sun was weak that morning, barely touching the frozen streets. Smoke hung over the city like a shroud, drifting between buildings that had already been scarred by years of war. Civilians shuffled through rubble, eyes sunken, breath turning to fog, and then the sirens began, deep, rolling, mechanical. That unmistakable howl that every German now knew meant only one thing. The fortresses were coming. Children looked up first, their faces pale in the gray light. High above, dots began to appear, dozens, then hundreds, until the sky itself seemed to be covered in moving silver. 1,000 B-17s, escorted by a swarm of Mustangs, were heading straight for Berlin. Down below, anti-aircraft crews scrambled to their posts, but many no longer believed in victory. They fired anyway, black puffs of flak clawing upward like desperate hands. From the ground they looked slow, almost serene. From inside it was hell. And one bomber, heaven sent. Pilot Lieutenant Edward Timberlake gritted his teeth as the cockpit filled with smoke. Oxygen was failing, one engine gone, but he held formation. The bombardier stared through his Norden sight. Crosshairs locked on a sprawling munitions plant on the city's edge. Bombs away! The aircraft lurched as 5 tons of steel and explosives fell free. Seconds later, the earth below erupted in a chain of shockwaves that ripped through warehouses, factories, rail lines. The shock could be felt miles away. Berlin, once the proud heart of the Third Reich, was now a city of flame, and in a bunker below the Reich Chancellery, officers watched from radio reports and spotter updates. Among them were men who had once mocked these bombers, calling them lumbering cattle in the sky. They weren't laughing anymore. The devastation was surgical, precise in daylight, relentless in rhythm. Factories were leveled, communication lines obliterated. Each raid cut deeper, not just into Germany's infrastructure, but into its psyche. By now, Luftwaffe command admitted what many already knew: the Americans had won the sky. Their bombers flew farther, carried more, and returned again and again despite losses that would have broken any other force. The B-17 wasn't just a machine of war, it was a symbol of endurance. A message written in smoke and fire: you can wound us, but you cannot stop us. When night fell, the fires of Berlin glowed red against the clouds. From the air, pilots could see their reflection in the inferno below, cities that once roared with confidence now silent. Broken, the same German commanders who had once laughed at the flying fortress now stood before maps covered in red markers. Each one a city left in ruin. They had underestimated not just a bomber, but the industrial will of an entire nation. And by the time the last fortress turned for home, its silhouette fading into the smoke-stained sky, one truth was clear: the laughter had died. The war in the air was over.